for joining the Nonprofit Learning Lab for today's workshop. If you have any questions along the way for our presenter, you can type them into the GoToWebinar chat box, likely found on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any tech questions, you can type them there as well. Without further ado, I will now hand it over to
I'm Kayla Myers, founder of Bridgepoint Evaluation. Today, we're going to spend about 30 minutes exploring some practical Excel strategies that can help you work with your data more efficiently and more effectively. And we're really going to start from the groundwork up. One thing I wanted to say right away is that this is not going to be an advanced Excel training. It is intended so that we can make Excel work better for you, establish a strong baseline, and then go up from there. So we'll start with organizing data. We'll end with a quick intro into things like t-tests and ANOVAs. We're really going to be focused on how do we structure and use data to make better decisions. So one thing I often talk to the organizations that I work with about is, how to really kind of organize and use that data so that it's working for you. How do we turn Excel into a tool that works for you rather than you working so hard with it? Today, we're going to cover 3 things: how to organize your data for success, a few formulas that are going to save you a lot of time, and then some advanced tools that you might want to explore next. My goal is really simple. I want you to leave with a few techniques that you can use immediately and a roadmap for what you can learn next. And I'm doing all of this in Excel intentionally. I want to be able to kind of show you what I'm doing, but I believe that you will have access to both the PDFs and this Excel spreadsheet at the end of this call. So wonderful. Well, good analysis really starts well before the formula. One of the biggest misconceptions about Excel is just how important the data structure is. So really setting up that data to support your future analysis goals is key. When organizations come to me, they're really frustrated with reporting challenges or just really feeling their data is stuck. It's often not because they don't know enough Excel. It's usually because the data is structured and organized in ways that require a little bit too much work on your end. So before we talk about formulas, let's talk about data structure. The biggest piece here is one row is one record. So making sure each row represents one thing. Maybe it's one participant, maybe it's one event or a survey response, but each row should represent a single record. When information is spread across columns or grouped inconsistently, Excel has a harder time analyzing it. So you'll see an example here. One of the messier examples is this participant, Marco, and we're tracking his participation in all of these different sessions. Yes, yes, or no. A better setup is a participant ID, 3 lines for Marco, the session date, and whether or not they attended. This is more rows, and it might feel like it's making the data more clunky, but it's a cleaner way to organize it from the onset so that you can use it and work with it moving forward. And again, remember, we're trying to figure out how do we set Excel up to do all of that more advanced analysis, tweaking, working with it. I also want to talk about unique IDs. This is a challenge I see a lot of organizations struggling with, and usually something I start working on right on the onset. So this is a problem I see quite consistently. Names truly are not unique identifiers, right? So some of the challenges that are going to come up with names is nicknames. One person or program manager enters Thomas Miller. One enters Tom Miller, another enters Thomas A. Miller. Another challenge is name changes. So Sarah Jones becomes Sarah Rodriguez. We also have spelling differences, especially when we work with people who perhaps might have names that don't translate well into kind of like the English or written English language. They might kind of just change up the spellings as well, just as they adapt and evolve, but you also have program staff potentially misspelling names. What we can do that would take it even a step further is having a unique participant ID and a participant name tied to it. It's also, keep in mind, going to help you de-identify that data so that those who are doing analysis or consistently working with the data aren't even seeing the names. So it kind of eliminates one extra area where bias might show up, but more than anything, it just keeps that data really nice and clean. Does the participant ID number have to matter? Not at all. I oftentimes just start off with a 7 or 8 digit number and count up from there. So really strongly recommend pulling in those unique IDs. Consistency is really going to be your ultimate key here. This is another challenge that often comes up with spreadsheets, especially when we're entering in the information from Excel rather than using something like a closed-ended survey with drop-down select items. Excel is extremely literal, right back to the naming problem, right? Excel is not going to think about Tom versus Thomas. Excel is not going to think about yes versus why. Humans know that these all mean the same thing. Excel doesn't care. So the same issue is going to happen with dates. If the date structure is different, program names, counties, demographics, survey responses, the more consistency you build in, the less cleanup you're going to have later. I'm based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so I'm going to be using Minnesota-based counties like Hennepin and Ramsey. But you can see here when we have things like attendance and we say yes, complete, Y, no, X, Excel doesn't know what to do with this information. It can't count it, and we'll talk about this COUNTIF function. It can't count it well. And so if we're going to then ask Excel, hey, let's count how many people actually came to this webinar, it's going to say like, one, I guess, I see yes one time versus consistently staying with Y or N. Similarly, once we get into pivot tables, which we'll also talk about later on in the presentation, it is going to say Henco is a county, Hennepin's a county, Hennepin County is a county, right? And it's just not going to be set up to help us quite well versus once we move over to consistency. There's a few ways to kind of force this consistency. So, first and foremost, you can just encourage everyone and work with them really hard to keep consistency. You can also go to this data tab, and then you can set up data validation rules. So you can pick from a pick list. You can say, we're going to only create kind of this one list, and then you can kind of create that list in Excel. So if you want to go that route, highly recommend searching for instructions on how to do this data validation list rules. Pretty easy to kind of onboard to, but that's a great option for you. Again, this is a bit of an intro session. Excel created its ultimate arch nemesis. I'm curious if anyone can guess what it is. I'll give you a second to think about it. What is the biggest problem in Excel for Excel to navigate? You don't have to type it in the chat or say it out loud. Just think. It is merged cells. And this is a little controversial because the people out there who are in data viz, or perhaps the people building reports in Excel, are going to say, don't take my merged cells. But what happens with merged cells is we might take this and say, well, I want all this on one line. And so we merge all of these cells together. What's the problem with that? It looks really nice. You can no longer sort the data. You can no longer filter the data. You can no longer export the data. It really, really breaks Excel. How Excel kind of built its own worst enemy is beyond me, but I strongly recommend build your reports in separate sheets from the data itself. So you can do all of your analysis in a sheet that has the data, all of your reporting in a separate sheet where you can bring in those nice and desirable merged cells. All right, take a quick breather. At this point, we have talked about the main things that you have to keep in mind in order to keep this sheet useful and functional. This is one record per row, consistency, and switch to using unique IDs instead of names. Now we're going to talk about the fun stuff, the tricks, okay? You will see when I have the formulas listed here, I'm going to have this little period in front of the equals. That's so that I can type it without Excel immediately trying to work for me. But when you actually use Excel, you're going to go ahead and skip that period. So The proper function introduces proper capitalization for whatever is in the other column. So this is for good name capitalization. I can use this proper function, and it's going to take any inconsistencies I have with using proper capitalization and just apply that for myself. Keep in mind, again, Excel is very literal. So I see Thomas Miller, Excel sees equals proper before. When you are done using the proper formula, you need to copy and paste it as values. So you can go ahead and hit Control C, right click, paste 1, 2, 3 as values, and now Excel will see it. Oh yeah, that's Thomas Miller. You're on the same page. Another fun trick is the trim function. Trim is going to get rid of any extra spaces that may have found their way into your spreadsheet. How would extra spaces get in there? If you copy and paste the information, if you export, especially like exports from things like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, they're going to sneak in a couple extra spaces before the session 1 word or maybe in between. So you need to get rid of those secret extra spaces. Equals trim, open parenthesis, click the cell that's going to contain the information, close it. Okay, B9. Now it's going to get rid of it. If I want to drag this formula down, let's say I have thousands of rows of data, I can double click. Oh, just kidding. It's not going to work for me this time. The challenge with doing the double click to drag the data down the whole way, Excel is very literal. It doesn't work very hard. So if I had a skip in my row and then it went back to session 1, Excel would say, oh, the data ended right here. That's as far as I'm going to go. And you won't know it until you somehow encounter that you didn't drag the formula the whole way down. So always double check. If you may have empty cells, Excel will have skipped that information. But you can see here where session 1 had like 3 spaces in between the word session and 1. Trim got rid of them for me. Got to double check. Did I copy and paste it? Nope. Excel still is only seeing a formula. So Control C. I click here, right click, paste values, 1, 2, 3. And now it's all changed over to the values. Let's talk about quickly counting. So let's say I go ahead, I went through and I did this proper, I did this trim, and now I'm nervous because I was double clicking to drag my formula the whole way down. And did it skip any of the rows because it found a blank cell? Or did I just not get everything? What I can do is I can quickly count all of the values that are in that row by using equals count A. All it tells Excel is to count the cell if something is there. Now it's working for me. So if I wanted to drag the formula the whole way down, I hit Control Shift down, close it, 8. Great. So all of these columns should have 8 values in them if all of them are supposed to be full. You can see how it tells me very quickly there's only 4 cells that contain any information in them, or 5 cells. This is really great if you just want to get an idea of how much information is across all of your columns, to double check the quality of your work, or just do some quick offhand reporting, right? So if people are kind of saying like, how many calls have we sent out versus emails? Excuse me. We've sent 4 calls and we have 5 emails out. Pretty quick counts. The other note that you'll see is that I put my formula on the top of my data. I do this quite consistently. If I start a spreadsheet and I'm adding in some new data, I might start my data at row 4 or row 5, letting me kind of keep the formulas at the top, continuously importing new data into that sheet at the bottom, and not have to worry about kind of moving around my formulas each time. So keeping my formulas at the top. All right, let me just double check where my notes here. Okay, exciting stuff. Let's keep going. Count A and count if. Let's talk about conditionally counting. So I showed you real quick, how do I just do this count A? How many records do I have? How many cells have something in them in this column. These count functions all serve different purposes. Count if gives you one condition. So you can say how many people attended our June workshop or how many people attended our May workshop. That's where I can add in this new formula, which is count if, and I'll walk you through kind of creating it. And then we can add in multiple conditions. Let's start off with count if. So again, we have this equals, and then it will say count if. When we open the parenthesis, Excel is going to give us a bit of an idea of what it wants here. First, we start off with the range. Where's all this data going to be existing? And I say right here, because I really want to know who attended our June workshop. After that, again, very, very literal. It needs to know what the criteria are. I do an open quotation, 6/1/2026, close that, close the parenthesis. Now my formula is complete. I enter that and it says 3 people. It met one condition. 3 people or 3 cells have the condition 6/1/2026. Fantastic. Now, the person who facilitated the June workshop for me, they're saying, how many people of that workshop completed the survey? I need to know how many people to follow up with. Did we reach that 80% threshold yet? And you're quickly able to say, no, we aren't able to meet that threshold yet. So out of those people who attended the 6/1 workshop, how many people have a survey status of why they've completed the survey? So now you can see where it gives us 2 options, and I'll type this out for you just so we can walk through it together. So criteria range 1 is here. This is the first thing I want you to go check is, do we have the June participants, June workshop participants? The second condition is, did they complete the survey, which you'll know because here in this column, it's going to have this literal response, why. Press enter, it'll give you a quick 2. Oh, did anyone see? Oh, see, I thought the formula may have been wrong, but it's because I had a May workshop who also completed the survey. So you can kind of mess with these, have different ways to conditionally count data and information. Talked about how to count cells that are full within a column. We've talked about how to count cells that meet certain criteria or multiple types of criteria. Let's talk about adding them all up, so summing them. Let's think about summing amounts based on a condition. How much funding was distributed in each county, or how many volunteer hours were there spent in each county? So here we have our different sites. We have dollars, volunteer hours, numbers served. You'll see I am breaking my rule here just for the sake of giving you an example. So these are a lot of records in one single row, right? Like this is, we have dollars, volunteer hours, numbers served. Bear with me because I'm just trying to show you some quick tricks. The first one I want to show you is sum if. So we're looking at, sum these based on the site or sum these based on the dollars. So let's go ahead and say, one of our program managers wants to know how much funding was distributed in Hennepin County compared to Ramsey County. So you're going to go ahead and tell Excel, and this is a little different from the count if, so make sure you're paying attention here. So go ahead and sum if this column is Hennepin, then I want to know how many dollars were spent. I want you to sum the information in this column. Hit enter, it'll give us 8,000. You can really quickly change that to Ramsey, although I just recommend having a separate spot, and we get 9750. Fantastic. How many volunteer hours have we spent in each of the counties that we're working in? Similarly, you can see how this is summing if, the first condition being that it's Hennepin County, and then I want you to sum all the values you find in our volunteer hours. You can quickly switch that by dragging this over. I want to know how many people we served in Hennepin, and it will kind of change that up for you really quickly. If you ever make a mistake in Excel, like any other Microsoft product, Control Z, it'll switch it right back for you. It's like it never even happened. And again, don't forget that you always have to delete these periods that I added in just for the sake of being able to go run through these quick. All right, data integration. If there is one thing that you take away that's going to be really fantastic, it's this tool, VLOOKUP. So I talked about at the beginning, we need to have one row per record. This is how you can then pull all of those records in. So your Excel workbook is going to contain a ton of different sheets in it because each sheet serves a purpose. One sheet doesn't serve many purposes. So you have all of your raw data, which is that really long, lengthy one row per record. Now I want to be able to start pulling in information into my other sheets so I can do analysis, okay? So we have all of the data over here. Here's our participant. Here's their pre-survey or their post, or I'm sorry, here's the survey type. And then we have their survey scores, pre-score, post-score, etc. So now I want to know from Hennepin per county, what are the post scores? Because I'm trying to average out this data across counties. So in my sheet that contains the participant ID and the county where the workshop was held, I'm going to try and pull in all of their post scores. How do I do that? I do that using VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP is powerful because what it's going to do is going to search for a unique piece of information. That's where this unique ID comes in, because Tom Miller is not going to end up being a unique piece of information when we spell it Tom or Thomas or Thomas A. Miller. But because I use that participant ID, it's going to be one unique piece of information. I'm going to tell it where I want to search. Here's where all the information lives. I'm going to have it pull the number, the column number of information. And then I use false because it's just trying to know, is it going to be an exact or unexact match? So let me just go ahead and show you, demonstrate how we do this. So equals VLOOKUP. I want it to look for this number right here. This is my unique ID. Excel says, okay, where am I going to find it? You're going to find it over here. This is our table array. This is where all the information lives. All right, sounds good. Which column number do you want me to pull over? 1, 2, 3, or I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this fifth column right here. And then we type in false, not a perfect match. And it says, great, it's 5. Wonderful. So I can drag this down and Excel is going to continue that forth for each of these different unique IDs. You'll notice you do have to kind of lock your table here. You do that by using a $sign. It'll go ahead and lock your table so that it doesn't move around for you. I'll show you how that works too. So right now you can see it pulled the whole table down, so it's going to miss any of the information up here. We can quickly fix that by just adding in those $signs and it won't move them around. Now it kept it right up there. So $sign will help you keep that from moving. The last thing, and then I'm going to open this up for questions, is pivot tables. Pivot tables allow you to very quickly pull together information, not necessarily a very strong analysis tool, but it's a really strong summarizing tool. So if I want to know what are the averages of the pre to post score, I can use a pivot table. We do this by highlighting all of our information and going to insert pivot table right here. Once you insert the pivot table, I'm going to show you what it looks like. It looks like, oops, apologies for that. I changed Excel so that I could display my screen to you all better, but let me just get back to the ribbon so I can look at this. Okay. Oh, sorry. I'll just do it again. Okay, so I highlight my information and I hit insert, pivot table. You should go to a new worksheet. I'm keeping it here so you can see what I'm talking about. I hit OK. It's going to give me all of these different fields. What I want to know is I want to know in Hennepin County, what were my pre-post scores? I take my county, that's going to be the row, and then I add in those scores. So I can look at, well, the sum of the score, that's not going to be that helpful, huh? So instead, what I wanted to look at, I want to look at those post scores. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my scores as my rows, and then I'm going to take Okay, survey type as my rows, so the pre and the post, and then the score as the value. Excel's default is sum. We don't want to sum up the scores. We want to change it. So we go to value field settings, and this is where you can start to think of things like averages, max, mins, things of that nature. You can also change it to a value, so percent of the column or row total, but we wanted the averages, and that's where it gives me that average score. So this is where you can kind of really quickly start to use the data. Again, I'm not going to go into like really details about how to dive in really deep with pivot tables, but I want you to have the keywords that you're searching in YouTube when you're trying to build this out yourself. Keep in mind, all of this is possible because your data is clean, because post and pre are clean, consistent, and the data is structured in this really easy to use way. The last thing I'll bring up with you all is what comes next. What's beyond pivot tables? At some point, organizations are going to start asking deeper questions, not just what happened, but did anything actually change? And so that's where those more advanced tools are going to come into play. Things like such as t-tests, if you really wanted to kind of get a statistical measure of the difference between those means, ANOVA's correlation analysis. You don't need to master these today, but you'll be able to use them once your data is cleaned up and a little bit more sophisticated. With that, I just want to share that, Excel is really a tool. The bigger opportunity is building a system that can help support your learning, your strategy, and your decision making. With Bridgepoint Evaluation, much of our work focuses on helping organizations move beyond tracking activity toward understanding impact, learning from evidence, and building those data-informed decision makings. A lot of times organizations just kind of need this quick boost to be able to better utilize Excel, and then they're able to kind of really dive in and make their data work for them. With that, I want to open it up to a question or answer. I know we have a minute left. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email. But any quick questions?
We do have a few. The first one is, when counting columns, does Excel start with 0, i.e. column A would be the 0th column, question mark?
When counting columns, I see. Okay, that's a great question. So that was based on the VLOOKUP. So with this one, if you see it's counting the 5th, it's because they have column C that is kind of snuck in here. It's counting the number of columns in the highlighting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull in the 5th, the information in the 5th column that you see.
Wonderful, thank you. We also have we have a few questions coming in. We have, can you explain the use of false versus true for VLOOKUP?
Yeah, so false, it's wanting to know, it's about like, I forget the exact definition. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Never in my career have I had to use true. It's always been false. And so it's about the exactness of the match. And I don't recall exactly what the definition is there that would trigger it into true, but I can tell you that I've never once typed in the word true. It's always been to use the word false. So sorry that that's kind of a non-answer, but it's a bit more of a practical answer.
Wonderful. And we have time for one last question, which is just asking if they can highlight a table somehow automatically without having to scroll down.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're here in A1, you're going to hold Control and Shift. You go all the way right. You see how it stopped there? That's because that's the only cell that contains information. So it will automatically stop when the information pauses, but I'm going to go all the way. I don't even know where it is at this point. It's probably in like ZZ. And then I go all the way down, and it's going to go ahead and highlight all the way down for me as well. So quick way is to highlight the entire sheet.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. That is what we have time for today. Thank you for everything, and thank you for coming. This workshop has come to a close. If you are interested in receiving the recording and materials from today's workshop, you can download them on the bottom of our free webinar page or email us at program@nonprofitlearninglab.org. Thank you so much for participating. And again, thank you, Kayla, for educating our community.
Thanks all.